International students have long been a cornerstone of Australian universities. After a significant decline during the pandemic, their numbers have surged, with 700,000 arriving in February. Remarkably, 1 in every 33 people in Australia is here for educational purposes. Tertiary education has become a lucrative sector, generating $32 billion in export revenue last year, trailing only behind iron ore, coal, and gas. However, the influx of students also creates a demand for housing, placing them at the center of a broader political debate on migration and housing. The government is considering implementing a cap on the number of international students, though the specifics are yet to be determined. This proposal has garnered bipartisan support. The peak body representing Australian universities accuses both major political parties of using international students as scapegoats ahead of next year's election. They argue that framing students as a problem in the broader debate on migration and housing is misguided. Universities have a strong incentive to maintain the current situation. Prestigious institutions like the University of Melbourne and the University of New South Wales rely on international students for about a third of their revenue. They contend that any reduction in this income stream could also lead to a decrease in research funding. Australia is not alone in this debate. Similar increases in international student numbers have been observed globally, not just as borders reopened post-pandemic but also due to a rise in student numbers across major countries like the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK over the past decade. This has raised questions about the sustainability of the international education sector and the credibility of educational outcomes. A key issue is whether these discussions occurred before implementing policies focused on reducing net overseas migration, rather than considering the overall structure of the international education sector and its implications for Australia, both as an export industry and a source of human capital and future skills. Students have specific impacts on housing, especially in areas around university campuses, where there are broader housing constraints. Additionally, students make substantial contributions to the local economy through their consumption and can create jobs both within universities and in surrounding areas. This positive impact is widely acknowledged in Australia. Current government policies have concentrated on enhancing the credibility of the education sector by raising language standards for applicants, scrutinizing higher-risk providers, and increasing fees to deter those less committed to education. The proposed cap is seen as a blunt instrument aimed at limiting overall net overseas migration. For universities accustomed to long-term planning for research and budgeting, such a sudden policy shift could significantly impact economies that heavily depend on international students. The UK has already implemented rules to limit the number of dependents accompanying students, affecting the number of people entering major markets globally. It will take time to see how these changes will affect international student flows. With the upcoming US election and uncertainty about potential changes in international student policies, it's too early to predict their impact on overall rankings. New entrants are emerging in the international education sector. Some European countries, like Germany, France, Sweden, and the Netherlands, have seen growth in international student numbers recently after a decline in the mid-2010s. Emerging countries such as the Philippines and Argentina have also experienced significant growth in international student populations. Thus, there may be a shift away from the major players and more diversification in trends, but it remains to be seen what these impacts will be. Governments often react strongly when numbers are perceived as too high. If Australian authorities impose this cap, it will likely influence the composition of international students in the future. Previous policies targeted lower quality education providers, and did not significantly impact the top universities, but a broader cap could affect these institutions more. This could potentially hinder their ability to invest in research, teaching, and employment opportunities. Education providers are concerned that they have not had sufficient time to fully assess or adjust to these changes, and they may face shortfalls in the coming year.